A breakdown of what happened and what's next from Dallas attorney Byron Henry, who's been digesting the appellate court decision. Byron, what was your takeaway?
Well, first and foremost, there was a question whether or not the Trump administration, through the Department of Justice, could even appeal a temporary restraining order. So that's a technical procedural question, but the Court of Appeals decided that because the order was in the nature of an injunction, basically, that they would go ahead and take up the appeal. So that was really the first hurdle that the administration had to climb, and of course it did. The real issue here is constitutional rights, and what the panel did was basically say that this travel ban applies to a broad array of people, including lawful permanent residents, which have vested constitutional rights in their green cards, and therefore it's a violation of their constitutional rights, or a likely violation. This isn't a final ruling, it's a temporary ruling. It's a likely violation of their constitutional rights if they're not giving notice and an opportunity to be heard before they are basically barred from traveling abroad or coming back into the country. So that was really the basis of the whole opinion. The one interesting thing is that the Department of Justice attempted to basically sweep the lawful permanent resident issue off the table by saying the administration has already said the executive order does not apply to lawful permanent residents, and the Court of Appeals, in kind of a rebuke, if you might say, to the administration, refused to take that proffer from the Department of Justice because it came from the White House counsel McGahn instead of the president himself, which normally a court deferring to the executive might say we're going to take the executive branch at its word, but in this case they said it didn't come from the president, so we're going to treat the executive order as if it applies to lawful permanent residents, which really put the Trump administration behind the eight ball because they know applying it to lawful permanent residents is a problem.
Right. Interesting. All right, so what happens now? What are the options for the Trump administration?
Well, the Trump administration can immediately take this to the United States Supreme Court, and it's only a stay. This is a very temporary measure, so this is far from the end of the process, but in an attempt to get the travel ban at least temporarily back into effect, they could take this to the Supreme Court immediately. If they did not do that, they can return to the district court and prepare for a full hearing on an injunction, which would occur in a few weeks. Or they could modify or somehow revise the executive order to take into consideration some of the issues that were pointed out in the panel opinion and maybe take some of those issues off the table and get an executive order in effect that could apply immediately. So those are just a few of the options.
We're speaking with attorney Byron Henry, examining this appellate court decision ruling against the Trump administration travel ban. Were you surprised that the decision was unanimous by all three judges? Because there was a Bush appointee on there.
Well, it was per curiam, meaning it wasn't signed, so we don't know if there were two or three judges in conjunction with it. We're going to assume that all three judges were in agreement because there was no dissent, but because it was per curiam and it was unsigned, we don't know who joined the opinion and who didn't. But assuming it was all three, I think the procedural context of the executive order, I have to be honest, that where it is in the process is so early, and there's so little been fleshed out, both in briefing, argument, or evidence in this case, that I just don't believe the court was comfortable overturning the lower court judge because appeals are about did the lower court judge make a mistake, but in a lot of cases they have a lot of discretion. And it's basically got to be a clear error. They've abused their discretion in some way. So I really believe the procedural the way the case sat procedurally hurt the Trump administration here because it's so early. Had they got a district judge that went the other way, I believe that the states would have had a hard time getting it overturned. But because the district judge went for Minnesota and Washington up front, I think it was just very difficult at this stage to overturn it. So it's going to take a lot more work for the Trump administration to get this ban either upheld in whole or in part.
Thanks, Byron. Byron Henry, attorney based in Dallas.
America's First News is online all the time. Follow us on Twitter @ThisMorningShow. Like us on Facebook or send us an email thismorning@compassmedianetworks.com.